Well, if you watch Fox News, you'd think that everything is Joe Biden's fault. I mean, it's even his fault that Southwest Airlines canceled a bunch of flights and that a winter storm hit Buffalo. But in the case of Southwest, there is actually a public policy implication, but it's not one that Fox News is going to like. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So in the wake of the winter storm, Southwest Airlines completely collapsed, canceling thousands of flights. The last time I looked at the newspaper about it, almost 98% of the flights canceled by any airline were canceled by Southwest. So what happened? Well, obviously, it's Joe Biden's fault. And his ne'er-do-well Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, whose name the Fox News hosts don't even seem to be able to pronounce. Let's check it out.
All right, chaos at the airports. Well, if you think it's over, it's not. It's continuing for yet another day. Nearly 3,000 Southwest Airlines flights.
Okay, let's start with this. At this point, Southwest has pretty much stopped canceling all its flights. So for all their talk about how it's just going on and on and on, at this point it does appear to be resolved, at least in the short run. Let's keep watching.
Flights have now been canceled today alone. But remember this, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said...
Okay, it's Buttigieg. Buttigieg. I know it's a tough name, but at least if you're going to be on Fox News, try pronouncing it correctly. Let's keep watching.
Travel issues would be better by the time the holidays rolled around. Roll tape.
Do you think this issue will be sorted in time for the holidays?
I think it's going to get better by the holidays. We're really pressing the airlines to deliver better service.
Okay, as it turns out, it did get quite a bit better during the holidays. The only exception was Southwest Airlines. Every other airline was actually doing pretty well as a result of it. So obviously, he was stating the truth there. Let's keep watching.
Yeah, how did that turn out for you? Sean Duffy joins me now. You know, Sean, this is a transportation secretary who was almost absent when it came to the supply chain meltdown. Now we have a meltdown of Southwest Airlines, thousands of people trapped in air.
He was almost absent during the supply chain meltdown. As I recall, he was on parental leave during that period, taking care of his children. So much for Fox family values. Let's keep watching.
He's always late to the game, isn't he?
Yeah, just to take a walk down history lane, Ashley, you go back a year ago when we had, ships in ports waiting to come in. He was on a paternity leave for 4 months. We didn't miss him. He was in Portugal.
Wait, paternity leave for 4 months and we didn't miss him. Now, on the one hand, they're criticizing him for taking paternity leave. On the other, because of the fact that it caused problems. On the other hand, they're saying we didn't miss him. Which is it? Is he this all-powerful person who creates chaos and he should be there all the time? Or is he this ineffective person who we don't miss? You can't have it both ways. Let's keep watching.
A little over a month ago when we had this strike for the rail workers, and now he's predicting that airline...
As I recall, the administration was pretty involved in addressing the whole issue of the strike with the rail workers. But the person who took the leadership in that particular case was the Secretary of Labor, because it was a labor issue. Let's keep watching.
Travel is going to work when it actually hasn't been working, as we've seen, as you mentioned, airports full of travelers and all these cancellations. The problem is when he was the mayor of South Bend, there were potholes everywhere. He couldn't take care of the infrastructure of South Bend when he was the mayor.
Okay. This I love, this example. Oh, there are potholes everywhere. Oh, he was a bad mayor. Well, from everything I've heard and seen, he was a pretty popular mayor of South Bend, actually. Are there going to be potholes in streets? Well, that's the nature of a street in a northern state in the United States. We get cold weather, it gets warm, the constant stretching will cause potholes. And, guess what? Then you have to go out and repair them. I actually worked in municipal government. I'm well aware of how difficult it is to manage the issue of potholes in a city. But to say, oh my God, he had potholes in his city, he shouldn't be transportation secretary, that's absurd. Now let's talk about what actually went on with Southwest Airlines. As it turns out, Southwest Airlines has a very, very old computer system. Now, you might say, why does that matter? Well, I mean, in this day and age, everything is run by computers. I mean, I went to a restaurant the other day, and we couldn't order because of the fact that their computers were down. Now, what a computer has to do with the chef being able to cook our meal and the waiter or waitress being able to bring it to our table, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, everything in business these days runs on computers. Now, in the case of Southwest, this was particularly critical because airlines have a very complex dance to manage. On the one hand, you've got airplanes flying all over the world, hundreds of them. In the case of Southwest, I believe they have almost 800 airplanes. And for an airline to be profitable, the airliners need to be flying. Every second an airliner is on the ground is costing the airline money. In fact, that's part of the special sauce that Southwest has used. In fact, their biggest competitive advantage relative to the other airlines and why they're able to generally offer lower prices than them is because of the fact that they don't have hubs, and so they don't wait for other flights to come in so people can transfer. They just bring the flight in, send it out. And if you've ever flown on Southwest, you've seen that before, where literally a plane comes in, the people get on board, they get the plane out. It's almost ridiculous how fast it happens. As a result of that, the Southwest airliners are in the air more than the airliners for the other airlines out there, particularly the large legacy airlines that have the large hubs, say in Atlanta or Detroit or Chicago. But what happens as a result of that is that these flights are very tightly scheduled. Everything is scheduled to within a second. And you might have experienced this before, where if you get on board an early morning flight, you're more likely to have it be on time than a flight later on in the day, because each little delay as the day wears on gets worse and worse. Now, that tight scheduling is made even more complex due to the fact that you've got federal regulations governing the duty time of the crews. Now, you might say, oh, regulations, federal regulations, bad, right? Well, in this case, what their aim is to try to make sure that the pilots and the flight attendants who are going to be responsible for your safety while the plane is flying are not overtired. Sounds like a pretty good thing. They say that pilots can only be on duty for a certain amount of time, and once their duty time expires, they can no longer be flying. Well, that gets even more complex because of the fact that someone's duty time may expire while the flight is ongoing. So they have to have sufficient duty time available that they're able to fly the whole flight. Some of you may have experienced this before, where a plane is all set to get going, and then some delay happens, and then as a result of the delay, suddenly one of the pilots or both of the pilots or maybe the flight crew go beyond their duty time. And as a result of that, they need to wait even longer till a new crew can be brought in. So all this process of managing the different gates at airports, which are a limited resource, the ground crews, which are a limited resource, the flight crews, which are a limited resource, and the airplanes, which are a limited resource, all spread around the world, is an incredibly complex dance that requires very sophisticated computer algorithms to make it work. Well, most airlines have invested in very sophisticated software to be able to do that. The exception, Southwest Airlines. And what has Southwest Airlines been doing with its money instead? Well, they've been buying back stock. Well, I've long been a critic of stock buybacks because they're basically a way of a company increasing its share price without actually investing in anything that's going to help the company. Executives love it because they actually don't have to really produce anything, and they can drive the share price up, which most of the time, by the way, is how the compensation for CEOs is determined. That certainly was the case for Southwest's last CEO, Gary Kelly, who is an accountant of all things, and whose priority, quite a contrast with Southwest's former CEO, Herb Kelleher, a lawyer, by the way. This guy's a number cruncher whose goal is to not provide leadership, but to squeeze out an extra dollar here wherever he can find it. Well, Southwest, ironically, has very strong unions, so he couldn't really do much there, but what he did do is fail to invest in a lot of the airline's infrastructure, including its computer infrastructure. Thus, they have these old computer systems that are not up to the task when the entire system gets thrown off by a winter storm. The other airlines could manage it fine because they have state-of-the-art computer software. Southwest, however, had the system basically implode because it wasn't up for the job. This is just one more example of how we need to change the laws in this country that have made stock buybacks the preferred way of executives to drive up the share price, rather than actually doing something that will improve the company's profitability for the long run. I mean, there are examples of Boeing, a company that had some pretty serious problems of its own, engaging in stock buybacks to raise its share price, rather than doing something like, oh, I don't know, designing a new airplane. But that's the way our system is set up now, to reward these short-term investments rather than encouraging companies to make long-term investments to achieve true, sustained competitive advantage. Well, as it turns out, I have my own nightmare on Southwest Airlines, and I did a video on it a little while back. Why don't you check it out over here? I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.